Robert F. Kennedy Jr., alongside his supporters, fully believe that the Democratic National Committee is doing everything in their power to ensure that Joe Biden is the nominee and wins the primary, and make sure that really, quite frankly, there is no other competition to Biden in the upcoming election for the Democratic primary. So in an open letter to the DNC, Kennedy Jr. wrote that equally disheartening is the DNC's refusal to hold debates. The matter of precedent is spurious, as there has been no serious primary challenge to an incumbent in more than 40 years. Voters deserve and democracy requires a competitive process by which to determine nominees. It should be a party's voters who choose a candidate, not party insiders who anoint one. The DNC and the Joe Biden campaign have essentially merged into one unit financially and strategically. Despite the promise of neutrality in its charter and bylaws, the DNC is not supposed to favor one candidate over another. It is supposed to oversee a fair democratic selection process and then support the candidate that its voters choose. So he is exactly right there. Why are they not holding debates? Why is Joe Biden not forced to get up on stage and debate against both Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson? Why can't voters on both sides of the aisle, specifically Democrats, be able to see who would be the best candidate in their case? Why can't they choose between Joe Biden, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Marianne Williamson? Just because a guy is president now doesn't mean that he's going to be the best possible candidate in 2024. The American people need to have more transparency here. They need to allow these three candidates to be up on stage and see who has the best overall idea. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is still saying that the primary is still not free and fair, and for Joe Biden to come out and say the importance of elections and the integrity of elections to be free and fair, for him to not actually debate, and also for the DNC to do all these changing of rules, such as not allowing New Hampshire to be the first state in which the primary takes place in. For all these years, New Hampshire has been the first state in which Democrats vote in their primary. And now all of a sudden this year, they want to change that over to where New Hampshire is no longer the first state, and instead they want the first state to be voted in South Carolina. Well, why is this? That's because New Hampshire is not going to vote for Joe Biden. Everyone knows this. New Hampshire is going to go either towards Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Marianne Williamson, and that would be a complete embarrassment for the sitting U.S. president to lose the first state. That's why they want to change it over to South Carolina. And the DNC also wants to have other rules kind of funky in the states of Iowa and Georgia as well, where it would be unfavorable towards Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. speaks about this. Let's go ahead and watch.
Hey everybody, it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here. Well, today the DNC did convene its Rules and Bylaws Committee, but sadly, not much has changed. Our primary is still not free and fair. The DNC is continuing to coerce New Hampshire to bend to the wishes of President Biden's re-election campaign. And if New Hampshire doesn't comply, then the votes of the people of New Hampshire won't count. And of course, there was no mention in the meeting of separating the Biden campaign financially and organizationally from the DNC. The DNC, by its own charter, is supposed to be impartial, but they're not even bothering to pretend. Meanwhile, our campaign is unstoppable. We continue to build momentum. We're getting giant crowds. We have over 200,000 volunteers. The contributions are coming in, and I want to thank all of you for your support. In signing that petition to the DNC, we generated over 30,000 signatures in the last 24 hours. And I got to personally speak to so many of you and hear your concerns for our democracy and for our country. This is only the beginning. We're going to take back our country. We have a people-powered movement, and I want to thank all of you for your continued support, and God bless you all, and God bless our country.
Now again, for Joe Biden to speak about the importance of free and fair elections over the past couple of years, and now for him to kind of work with the DNC to make sure that this upcoming election within the Democratic primary is anything but free and fair, and to change the rules in his favor, well, I mean, just my opinion, but that is a pretty hypocritical move. Now, RFK Jr. was recently on Fox News on the Hannity Show, because really that's one of the few networks who is willing to give RFK Jr. a platform, because we have other mainstream media, sources like CNBC, who is, completely ignoring the fact that anyone is running against Biden because they want Biden to be the guy. They don't want anyone other than Biden. So on Hannity actually asked RFK Jr., if the DNC and Democrats aren't willing to, give you a chance in a free and fair election, are you going to consider running as an independent? Let's go ahead and listen to his answer.
Your campaign manager, Dennis Kucinich, actually said the following in a letter to the DNC, that they created a class, unfortunately, of pledged delegates called party leaders, elected officials, essentially the same as superdelegates due to the amount of control the party exercises over elected officials. Basically saying you can't get a fair shake, that the deck is stacked against you. Joe Biden already pulled out of Iowa, pulled out of New Hampshire, because he thinks he'd do better starting in South Carolina. If you're not going to get a fair shot with the Democratic Party, and you're not getting even a fair shot in the mainstream media, you were very complimentary of Fox. We appreciate it, that we're being fair and we give you a voice. My question to you is, why stay with the Democratic Party? Would you consider third party? Would you consider the no labels party or any party?
Well, right now we're still arguing with the DNC and trying to get them to hold actually a fair election. As you pointed out, they have disenfranchised now all of the voters essentially in Iowa and New Hampshire, the states in which President Biden ran fourth the last time around. So they're punishing the states that did not vote for President Biden the last time by basically disenfranchising the voters, making it so that if you live in New Hampshire, you cannot vote for anybody but President Biden this time around. They're trying to do something else, which I think is much more alarming, which is they're trying to pass a rule. They're debating right now to pass a rule, and it's almost certain to pass, that voters in Georgia will be disenfranchised if they vote for any of if they vote for me or for Marianne Williamson.
Well, let me ask you that. Will you consider running on another party ticket?
Well, right now I'm focused on trying to run as a Democrat. This is my home. This is the place I grew up.
They don't seem very friendly to you.
I'm hoping to make the Democratic Party work.
When Sean Hannity's nicer to you than they are, you got a problem. You would agree with that?
I
if they're not treating you fairly, why stay with them? If they're not going to treat you fairly, why?
Well, I'm hoping that they will. I'm hoping that they will at least allow a fair vote in the states outside of New Hampshire and Iowa. We'll know this week.
Now, obviously, RFK Jr. running as an independent would certainly, throw a huge curveball into the election. And once again, if the DNC doesn't want him on their platform, on their ticket to run, and they're not willing to give him a fair, shot versus Biden, why not run as an independent, even if that could end up, going against Biden in the end? And what it's really going to come down to, because right now we have voters who are for sure they're going to vote for Biden in 2024. We have voters who are for sure they're going to vote for Trump in 2024. But what it's really going to come down to are those people in the middle, maybe that 10% that could really swing either way. And are we going to have more potential voters for Biden swing towards RFK Jr., or are we going to have more potential voters who would normally vote for Trump swing towards RFK Jr.? It's more than likely it's probably going to be those Biden voters swinging towards RFK Jr. So if RFK Jr. is able to take enough votes from Biden, that could make it so Trump is actually going to end up winning rather than Biden winning in 2024. Now, also in the interview, he speaks a little bit about needing more transparency in how the American people, and quite frankly, himself even, need more openness within the assassination of JFK. Let's go ahead and have a listen.
Let me first ask you about the Secret Service agent. The guy's name is Paul Landis. He talked about the magic bullet. Magic bullet to me was absurd from day one. To me, it never had any credibility. He was there, even put himself on record at the time, and mentioned that he made a mistake in his placement of the bullet in that room where your uncle was after he was shot. My question to you is, should this now open a full-fledged investigation?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about this development is not really his revelation, because this information has been out there, and the information, the overwhelming information that there was more than one shooter involved and that there were multiple people involved has been recognized by the American people. 70% of Americans don't believe the Warren report, but more importantly, when Congress reinvestigated the Warren Commission evidence and was looking at much more evidence in 1979, the House Select Assassinations Committee, they came to the conclusion, and this was the official conclusion of the report, that John Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy. The majority of that House staff believed that it was the CIA behind that conspiracy. The important thing that's happened now is finally the New York Times, the orthodoxy is starting to crumble. The New York Times, which has been the major bastion, the champion of the Warren Committee report long after it was discredited by a million different sources. The other thing that's important now, Sean, is, I think that they ought to have a real investigation of what happened, a genuine investigation. That looks at all the evidence, the millions of pages of documents that are now available. But more importantly, the last 5,000 pages of documents that the CIA will not release. It's breaking the law now. They're supposed to release those documents by 2017. President Trump promised to release them, which was his duty, and then he didn't. We don't know why. President Biden promised to release them, and then he didn't. We don't know why. Among those documents, the most interesting things that people want to know about is Bill Harvey's, the Miami station chief, who almost certainly was directly involved in the assassination, his travel records on that day. And I think most of the scholars who are looking at this issue, that is the principal piece of interest that they want to know about, that we believe that the CIA is concealing.